الحمد لله وكفى والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد. Respected listeners, today we recited Surah Al-An'am and also a few final verses of Surah Al-Ma'idah. The last few verses, 5 verses that we recited of Surah Al-Ma'idah, relate a conversation that will take place between Allah and the Prophet Isa alayhi salatu wasalam on the Day of Judgment, in which Allah Azza wa Jalla will say to him that, O Isa, the son of Maryam, did you tell people to take you and your mother as gods besides Allah? He will reply that, may you be glorified and purified of everything. How can I say something of which I have no right? Had I said it, you would have known, for you know everything that is in my heart, but I do not know what is in your heart. You are the knower of all secrets. I only told them what you instructed me to say to them, which is that, O people, worship Allah who is my Lord and your Lord. But I was a witness amongst them as long as I remained in them. Then when you called me unto yourself, you became the watcher over them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just relates this conversation here so that people may realize that on the Day of Judgment, Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, you see, Allah Azza wa Jal knows everything, and He has no need to ask Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wasalam that did you tell people to make you and your mother gods besides me? But Allah will do this in order to silence the Christians. And before all the Christians, and before the whole of creation, Allah will ask Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wasalam this question so that He may make His proof final and binding upon the Christians. That who instructed you to? Because this is what the Christians say. They say that Jesus Himself has informed us that He is God and the Son of God, and therefore we should worship Him. And it isn't something that we do of our own accord, but He was the one who informed us Himself that He is the Son of God and God Himself. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in order to silence the disbelievers on the Day of Judgment, He will conduct this conversation with Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wasalam in a very public way, and Allah Azza wa Jalla has already related it in the Qur'an that this is what He will ask Him on the Day of Judgment. We then recited Surah Al-An'am. Surah Al-An'am, unlike the surahs that we've been reciting so far, is a Meccan surah. After Surah Al-Fatiha we read Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Al-Imran, Surah Al-Nisa and Surah Al-Ma'idah. All 4 of these surahs are Madani surahs, and therefore the topics reflected the Madani theme, and I've explained that over the past few days. Now Surah Al-An'am is a Meccan surah, it's not a Madani surah, and therefore the topics are very, very different. There's a very sharp contrast between the Meccan surahs and the Madani surahs, and I've explained that before. Just to summarize again, because the Prophet ﷺ dealt with a completely different people in Mecca, and the circumstances of the Muslims were also very different in Mecca to what they were in Medina, and the challenges that the Prophet ﷺ faced, the demands that were made from him were also very different to those in Medina. And that's why the topics are quite different. First of all, there are very few laws, if any, mentioned in Meccan surah. Only briefly in the surah Allah Azza wa Jal mentions those meats that are halal, those animals that are halal and those that are haram, once if they haven't been slaughtered, etc. Apart from that, no laws are mentioned. Furthermore, there is very little mention except a passing reference in 1-2 verses to the Jews, and there is no mention of the Christians. Also, there is no mention of the hypocrites. However, in verse after verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the mushrikeen, the pagan Arabs, because they were the ones that the Prophet ﷺ had to deal with in Mecca. Also, because the Muslims were also in the very early stages of Islam, and there were very few laws that they had to actually abide by, apart from the general principles of Tawheed versus Shirk, and belief in the oneness of Allah, and belief in the hereafter, and in resurrection after death, and Jannat and Jahannam, things which the pagan Arabs did not believe at all. These things are mentioned in some detail over and over again. And in order to explain the evil and the fruitless and futile nature of Shirk, and the power and the purity of Tawheed, Allah Azza wa Jal gives examples in many different ways. Furthermore, in order to show how it makes more sense to worship Allah, who is the Creator, who is all-powerful, and it doesn't make any sense to worship these false idols that neither hear nor speak or hold any power to help themselves or anybody else. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in order to show that and prove it, Allah speaks about the beauty of His creation, the harmony in His creation and His power. So Allah makes many references to the beautiful things in His creation that reflect His oneness, His wisdom and His power. So these things are mentioned. If I can just go through the surah in order. In the beginning, Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about His power, His knowledge. Allah also speaks about the people of the past, how they were more powerful than the mushrikeen, yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them because they opposed their respective prophets alayhi salatu wasalam. Allah Azza wa Jal consoles the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam that these mushrikeen, these pagans, make many demands of you, but do not despair. The truth is, they don't ask you for proof again and again because they want to believe, but it's just their intransigence, it's just their obstinacy and their stubbornness. Otherwise, even if you were to produce a book for them whose pages they touched, they would still say this is magic. And they say, why doesn't Allah send an angel? Well, again, if we sent an angel, they still would not believe. Then the Prophet ﷺ is told that even the prophets who came before you were ridiculed by their respective people, but do not let this disturb you. Allah speaks about the power of His creation, and then Allah also speaks about the Day of Judgment, how on the Day of Judgment Allah will gather these mushrikeen, Allah will address them, saying that where are those false gods that you used to worship? How can they help you today? And the mushrikeen, as is the case with the kuffar, they will swear in the name of Allah that we never ever committed shirk. And they will attempt to lie before Allah, even on the Day of Judgment. Allah then also explains another phenomenon, which is that these mushrikeen, these pagans, in Makkah, they would converse with the Prophet ﷺ, they would hear the tilawah of the Holy Qur'an, yet they would not believe. And this would amaze a lot of people, that how come they would hear the beautiful Qur'an being recited, and the Qur'an would not penetrate their hearts. So Allah Azza wa Jalla says, and there are those amongst them who listen to you attentively, but we have placed seals on their hearts, and we have placed a barrier in their ears. Even if they see every sign, they will not believe. And until they will come to you, arguing with you, and then the disbelievers will say that these verses that this prophet recites, these are merely the fables and the legends of the former people. This explains why they, even though they could hear the Qur'an and they could understand it, the light of the Qur'an would never penetrate their hearts. Allah then speaks about the Day of Judgment, that how will it be when these people shall be standing on the brink of the fire, and Allah will address them then, and then throw them into eternal punishment. Allah speaks about the reality of worldly life, that worldly life is but a play and jest, and the abode of the hereafter is better for those who have taqwa, if only you have sense. Allah then consoles the Prophet ﷺ that, Ya Rasulullah, we know that you are grieved and hurt by the fact that by what these people say. But do not worry, they are not rejecting you and they are not calling you a liar. They are rejecting the signs and the verses of Allah. But, O Prophet of Allah, just like you, before you, many messengers were rejected, but they were patient, and they were persecuted, but they were patient until our assistance arrived. So be patient. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a very chiding way that, Ya Rasulullah, why do you grieve so much? Why are you so hurt by their rejection of your message? If you cannot tolerate their rejecting you, then what else can you do apart from patience? If it bears down heavily on you that they reject you, then is it possible for you, O Prophet of Allah, to find a tunnel in the earth and hide therein? Or is it possible for you to find some steps all the way up to the heavens and then forcibly bring down a miracle to show to them? No, you can't do this, therefore do not be so grieved. And if Allah wished, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have guided all of them. This is Allah's choice. The verses continue with the same topic about how people can only turn to Allah and nobody else, how it's futile to worship anything else, to turn to anything else besides Allah, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has all the power, how Allah is mighty over His servants, how Allah has knowledge of everything, etc. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, how Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam showed his people the reality of Tawheed and the false nature of Shirk, and how his people opposed him, and how he confronted his people and told them that why should I fear your false gods when you do not fear Allah, and when you do not fear the fact that you have committed Shirk with Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then speaks about the children of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, because the mushrikeen, the pagans, used to claim to be the racial descendants as well as the religious descendants of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, and they said that this life of ours, this lifestyle of ours, and these beliefs and this religion of ours, we have inherited it from Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the reality of Sayyidina Ibrahim, his family and their religion. Then towards the end of the surah, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions many things about Allah's power of creation and Allah's signs in His creation. This is a famous theme and a characteristic of all the Meccan surahs. Allah Azza wa Jal in many different ways speaks about the power of His creation. I'll just translate some of the verses so you can understand, and I'll explain why. Allah Azza wa Jal says that Allah is the one who splits the seed and the stone. He extracts the living from the dead and the dead from the living. He is the one who causes the morning to break. He is the one who has made the night a time of peace, and He has placed the sun and the moon in orbit with calculation. This is the calculation of the one who is almighty, all-knowing. He is the one who has placed for you, who created for you stars, so that you may find guidance with these stars in the darknesses of the sea and the land. It is He who has created you from one soul, and then placed you upon the earth, where you shall reside for a short while. It is He who sends down rain from the heavens, and then having done so, Allah Azza wa Jal extracts from this rain vegetation of all kind, green and lush, from which Allah Azza wa Jal extracts further seeds that are piled on top of one another. How Allah causes bunches of grapes and bunches of dates to grow, and how Allah spreads gardens and orchards and vineyards. Allah also creates amazing fruits such as the olive and the pomegranate, fruits that are similar to one another yet still very different. How these fruits ripen. In all of these things there are signs for people who believe. Allah Azza wa Jalla is the one who is the originator of the heavens and the earth. How can Allah have a child? And how can Allah have a wife and a partner? It is He who has created everything. This is your Lord, this is Allah, there is no God besides Him, who is a creator of all things, therefore worship Him. And Allah is a watcher and a guardian over all things. The eyes cannot encompass Allah, but He encompasses all the eyes. And He is the one who penetrates everything and knows everything, and who is all-knower of everything. Allahu Akbar. In this way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about many of His signs. And then further on as well, Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about the signs of His creation, how He has, again, fruits, how He causes them to grow, how He has given us animals and cattle. Now, Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about these signs, and some of us, they may not seem very prominent, water, rain, vegetation. But you see, the Qur'an's style is very different. We think very differently, and Allah wants us to think differently. Sometimes the most obvious things, the greatest truths are the simplest. The greatest truths are the simplest ones. And the greatest blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the simplest ones. But we overlook simplicity, and we look for things in complexity. For example, of all the drinks on earth, we can come up with many juices and artificial drinks, but there is nothing like water. We may build mansions, and there may be monuments and great architecture all over the world, but there is no house like the simple black cube of Allah, the Kaaba in Makkah al-Mukarramah. We look for signs of Allah's creation in small things, yet we ignore the sign of His power in the changing of the day, the disappearing of the light, the onset of darkness, the disappearance of darkness and the break of morning. We ignore Allah's power and the beauty of His creation in the sun and in the moon and their calculated orbits around the earth. Well, calculated orbits of this moon around the earth and the earth around the sun. We look for signs of Allah's creation and the beauty and power of His creation in complex things, yet we overlook the fact that rain comes from the heavens, falls upon the dead earth. The dead earth all of a sudden blossoms and blooms, and from a dead seed Allah Azza wa Jal creates entire trees and entire orchards full of fruit which is lush, beautiful, delicious for us to eat, and it's never ending. You see, Allah Azza wa Jal draws our attention to these simple and great signs of His creation. And we're looking for the name and the spelling of Allah in tomatoes and in aubergine still. Sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't see it. Like I said, every 2-3 years, or every now and then we hear of someone buying a bengan or an aubergine at the local grocer's, cutting it and finding a seed formation that spells out Allah. Now, sometimes it's true. Sometimes people are just reading too much into it because they go around showing other people, and some people say, yeah, I can see it. Others say, no, we can't see it. And we show, people give this to the newspapers and say, look, this is the truthfulness of Islam, that we can see Allah's name in the seed formation of the aubergines, etc. And the newspapers publish a story, and then the next day the newspapers publish another story as well, that some Christian saw a cloud formation in which he saw Jesus on the crucifix, being crucified. On the third day, the newspapers will publish a third story that some Hindu temples have got these false gods in their temples that are drinking milk. Oh, a god that drinks milk. Therefore the god must be true. Hinduism must be true because some false god made out of metal is drinking milk. For them, the beauty of their religion is in the fact, the truthfulness of their religion is in the fact that some soulless, senseless idol is drinking milk. Others see formations and pictures in the clouds. And Muslims see formations in bengan. Now, at times it's true, but it's not always the case. See, Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about the most beautiful signs in His creation. The sun, the moon, the sky, the earth, the mountains, the camel, the animals, the cattle that He has given us, the food, milk. In one verse Allah Azza wa Jal so beautifully explains, and if someone was only to ponder over this, Allah speaks about cattle. نسقيكم مما في بطونها من بين فرث ودم لبنا خالصا سائغا للشاربين. Allah says that we feed you from the stomachs of these cattle and these animals. We give you to drink from the stomachs of these cattle and animals. From in between flesh and blood. Milk which is pure and which flows easily down the throats of those who drink. Now just ponder over that. This milk that we drink from the animals, we have it every day. We don't even think. We have it with our cereal, we have it with our tea, we have it raw. Yet how many of us have actually paused and thought that this milk, blemishless, spotless, pure, delicious, nourishing, miraculous in every way, has come from in between flesh and blood. It's come from in between flesh and blood. So we overlook the greatest signs of Allah's creation and we look for signs in other things. See, this is a famous theme of the Makkah surahs. Allah Azza wa Jalla constantly speaks about the power of His creation. And He invites the mushrikeen to ponder over these things as opposed to their false gods. Their false gods can't do anything. Why worship them and neglect the worship of such a creator? For example, in one verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَسْجُدُوا لِلشَّمْسِ وَلَا لِلْقَمَرِ وَاسْجُدُوا لِلَّهِ الَّذِي خَلَقَهُنَّ إِن كُنتُمْ إِيَّاهُ تَعْبُدُونَ. Do not worship the sun and the moon, but worship that Lord who created the sun and the moon, if you are truly worshippers. I end with just explaining how the surah has been named. Surah has been named Al-An'am, the cattle. One of the reasons is because Allah boasts of His favour to creation when He has given them cattle. And also because there's some other mention of cattle here, which is as follows. See, the pagan Arabs, the mushrikeen, they were very superstitious. And they like to invent things in their religion. Actually, the surah has been named Al-An'am because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has boasted of His favour about cattle. And also because, as I said, the mushrikeen were very superstitious. And they invented things. They invented things in their religion. One of the things that they had invented is that each year, when they would grow crops in parts of Arabia, and when they would have their cattle, and there were many newborns in their cattle, each year they would take out a share, 2 shares, 3 shares. They would take out a share for themselves, for their personal use. They would also take out a share from their wealth, from their crops, vegetation, as well as their cattle, and say that this we give in the name of our gods. And another portion they say, this we give in the name of Allah. Now, they would decide this in the very beginning, before the crops, before the harvest, and before the end of the year, before the birth season of the animals. Now, they would intend this at the beginning of the year. When the time would come, if there was a shortfall, if there was a shortage in the crops and vegetation, then they would ensure that they would extract the full share for their personal use. They would also extract the full share for their gods. And whatever shortage there was, they would ensure that that shortage was in the share of Allah. This is one thing that they would do. Then another thing they did with their cattle, they would designate certain cattle randomly and say that this cattle we don't sacrifice, we consecrate in the name of Allah. So they are free to go. Nobody can touch them. Nobody can harm them. Nobody can milk them. Nobody can eat from them. Nobody can slaughter them, kill them. Nobody can ride them. Nobody can make them work. They are consecrated in the name of God, and they should be allowed to roam freely. Just like in India, cows are everywhere. And the cattle in India, the cows are better fed than the population of India. It's a fact. Over there, cows in the millions, because they believe them to be holy, and they've consecrated these cows in the name of God. No one can touch them, no one can harm them. Astaghfirullah. Can't do anything. And they're all over the place. And when a cow steps onto the road, everything comes to a halt. Because they worship it. So, this is what they would do with cattle in Arabia as well. They would designate certain cattle and consecrate them in the name of God, in the name of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says again, where do they get this from? Something else they would do with cattle, false superstitious belief, is that when the cattle, when these cows, etc., when some of these cattle would carry children, they were pregnant, they would say that whatever is in the stomach of this animal, this is only halal for the males amongst us. When the child is born, the females, our women, cannot eat. But if it's a dead or a stillborn child from the stomach of that animal, then the women can eat also. And in this way, they would invent things about what would be halal and what would be haram from amongst the cattle. They had many superstitious beliefs and practices regarding cattle. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allah never mentioned any of this to any of the Prophets alayhimu salatu wasalam, nor has He ever revealed this or instructed anyone in His creation to abide or live by these principles. And whoever does so, then they ascribe a false belief to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I end with just one further explanation. You see, the whole surah has been named Al-An'am, cattle, because of these few verses in which the cattle are mentioned. Islam has abolished superstition and false beliefs. And we must also be very careful that in our religion we don't invent practices and beliefs and then ascribe them to Allah or ascribe them to religion, when in reality they have no basis whatsoever. And when we do this, we are no different to the pagan Arabs. I'm not saying we're mushrikeen, I'm just saying that just as Allah condemned the pagan Arabs separately for their shirk and also separately for introducing false superstitious beliefs into their religion and false practices that had no basis and history. Similarly, when we introduce false superstitious beliefs, even though they may not be idolatry, they may not have any elements of paganism or shirk in them, still, if there is no basis, then it's not permissible. Whatever we believe and practice must have a basis in the Qur'an and Sunnah. Must have some relationship to the Qur'an and Sunnah. And some examples of false superstitious beliefs, not even superstitious but strange beliefs, is that, people believe about in qada'i umri, that after Jumu'ah Salah, if you read 2 rakat nafil Salah with the intention that this is the qada of all of my whole life's missed Salah, then you can pray 2 rakat Salah and all the salawat that you've missed in your whole life are all compensated for and your sins are forgiven. That's the Salah that people have invented. Some people perform special salawat on the final Jumu'ah of Ramadan. Again, they have no basis. People perform special salawat on certain nights of the year, such as on the 15th of Sha'ban, or on the night that they believe Mi'raj took place, and they pray all kinds of different salah. Again, these have no basis in the Sharia. We can't invent a salah. Salatul Tasbih is a sunnah, it's been mentioned in that hadith. Salatul Tasbih is different, but Salatul Tasbih one can read any time, not on any particular night. And the 15th of Sha'ban, there is virtue and merit in that night, and that's been mentioned in that hadith, and it's a blessed night. But no particular form of worship has been prescribed for that night. And as far as the night of Mi'raj is concerned, we don't know when Mi'raj took place precisely. So we can't designate any one night. People say the 27th of Rajab, but that's just a random date. There's nothing in that hadith or in the literature of Islam that justifies that date. So we can't just invent things in our religion, and there are some wild superstitious beliefs that people believe in. Apart from this, forget salah on any particular day and night, but there are some things that people believe, especially with regards to beers and the power of beers, and certain forms of ruqya, and people say there's some muwakkal, and wallahu alam. Once I went somewhere and someone told me that everybody was getting ready to go and meet someone, and these were people who don't even pray Jumu'ah, they only pray Eid. They only pray Eid twice a year, and they all did ghusl. They did ghusl, put on fresh clothes, and I said, "Where are you all going?" And they said, "We're going to meet this muwakkal." What do you mean? They said, "It's a very holy person, and everybody's going to meet him. There'll be a gathering of thousands of people. And what do you do there?" He said, "This muwakkal, he has special gifts and powers from Allah, and he is able to speak with the dead, and he's able to reveal secrets and tell you things of the unseen, And if you ask him, he will tell you he's got, you see, he's a special representative and he's a muwakkal, he's got so many jinns with him, etc., etc. And I had to try really hard to convince them. Alhamdulillah, in the end they never went, but only after a lot of argument. Otherwise they just wouldn't believe it. So they don't pray any salah, just pray, not even Jumu'ah, Eid, but they actually did a ghusl and dressed specially to go and see this muwakkal. And I asked them, does he pray salah? The man doesn't even pray salah. The man doesn't even pray salah. No salah, and he has immense power like this. It was false superstitious beliefs. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. May Allah Azza wa Jalla give us the tawfiq to understand. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala abdihi wa rasulih nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed miraculous powers in the hands of certain people. And the miracles of the saints of this ummah are true, and we believe in them. And the miracles of the saints, we believe in them. We believe in the awliya, we believe in the karamat of the awliya, we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed shifa in certain things and at the hands of certain people. We believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed power in the dua of certain people. We believe that Allah Azza wa Jal has placed barakah in the spit, in the blow, and in the touch of many of His servants. But who are these servants? First of all, they must be upright, they must be pious, they must be fearing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They must be those who follow the sunnah of His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. They must be people of ilm and knowledge. They must be people of piety and taqwa. Then, of course, we will request one another for dua. And there is no harm in asking a pious person to pray. And the prayer of another person for another can be accepted. Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala an, went to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, sought permission for Umrah and said, Ya Rasulullah, I wish to go for Umrah. Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, of course. And then upon his departure, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu an, Ashrikna ya akhi fi du'a'ik wa la tansana. That, oh my brother, who the Prophet ﷺ said to Umar radiyallahu anhu, oh my brother, include me in your dua and do not forget me. So there is no harm, it's a sunnah to ask one another to pray. And there is no harm in asking the pious to pray. Because the Prophet ﷺ told the same Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu that you will meet a man who has never seen me, who serves his mother from amongst the people of Yemen, Uwais al-Qarni radiyallahu anhu. When you meet him, ask him to pray for you and seek forgiveness on your behalf. Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu, when he became Khalif, each year he would wait in Hajj and inquire of all of the delegations from Yemen, that is there someone who is like this from amongst you? And then one year finally he discovered him. He called him, he went to him, and he found Uwais al-Qarni radiyallahu anhu. He asked him all of the questions that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him to ask. Uwais al-Qarni radiyallahu anhu replied exactly how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said he would reply. Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu said to him that, pray for me and seek forgiveness on my behalf. Why? Because even though he was not a sahabi, he was so pious. Sayyid Uwais al-Qarni radiyallahu anhu, he never saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he believed and he lived at his time. He was in Yemen, he couldn't come because he was serving his mother. Uwais al-Qarni radiyallahu anhu was so pious. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu to look for him and find him. And to ask him to pray on his behalf. And to do istighfar on his behalf from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's a sunnah to seek the du'as of the pious. It's a sunnah to seek the barakah of the pious. And there is barakah if you can ask someone to pray and to blow, to pray on water, on food, and that prayer should also be from the Qur'an and the Sunnah. There is barakah, and there's also shifa. You know, at times people have seen miraculous incidents of shifa at the hands of the pious. How, subhanallah, one touch from a pious person and their dua has cured people with terminal illnesses. And we believe in that. That is a karama, and that is the barakah that Allah has placed in the hands of certain people. But these people are pious themselves. They are upright examples. They are examples of piety, of taqwa, and of sunnah. Anyone who doesn't pray salah Anyone who doesn't pray salah and then writes ta'weed. Anyone who doesn't pray salah and then charges £50 for an appointment and a £200 further for dua. Anyone who doesn't pray salah and people go to see him solve their problems. That person is a charlatan, an imposter, a gunda and a gangster. And that person is using religion, abusing religion. And there is nothing there. People will believe anything. Astaghfirullah. How the most intelligent of people go to these kind of fraudsters and charlatans and imposters. These medicine men, witch doctors. Ultimately they are, that's what they are, witch doctors. In Birmingham we see these leaflets. I've seen so many of these leaflets. Sheikh Zubair, Sheikh Bashir, Sheikh Shabir, Sheikh Fulan, Sheikh this, Sheikh that. Go to him. This is a telephone number. Invariably they all tend to be from Small Heath. (773) Magic potions. He will bring back love into your life. He will get you the person you love. He will get you married to whoever you want to. He will make sure your business is successful. He will solve your problems, your marital problems, problems with your business partner. Give you children. Ma'adallah, ma'adallah, ma'adallah. In a hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, whoever goes to a fortune teller or a soothsayer and then believes what he says, his salah will not be accepted for 40 complete days. And according to one narration, he doesn't even have to believe. By just going to a soothsayer and a fortune teller, just by that act, his salah will not be accepted for 40 whole days. And in another narration, the Prophet ﷺ says, if he trusts and believes what the soothsayer and fortune teller tells him, فَقَدْ كَفَرَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ, then he has committed kufr with the truth that was revealed to Rasulullah ﷺ. He may end up committing kufr. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. They do all kinds of things. One brother was telling me that one of them came up and set up shop next door to his shop. So he owned a butcher's shop. He had a butcher's shop. I think he's sitting here, maybe. He had a butcher's shop. He was a butcher, he had a meat shop. And he said one of these fraudsters came and set up a shop next to him. He didn't realize at first, but all of a sudden, his meat trade began thriving. People were coming and buying meat in bucket loads. And he couldn't understand why. And they used to always ask for liver, this, that. And when he made some inquiries, what he found out is that actually it wasn't the meat they were interested in. What was happening was that they were going next door to this fraudster and charlatan. And for some reason he used to tell them, bring me the liver of this animal. Bring me the heart of this animal. Bring me meat. And then they'd come, how convenient, the butcher's is just next door. So they'd pop next door, buy the meat and go to him. And Allahu Alam what he used to do. Read the entrails of chickens or study the liver of goats, Wallahu Alam. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi. Our Muslims, inna lillahi, astaghfirullah wa rabbi. People would laugh at this and say, all right, these were the backward village type people who would do all of this. MashaAllah, I know individuals. I don't know them personally, but I know of them because their family members have complained to me about them. Educated people with degrees, professionals, lawyers, accountants, white collar workers, people work in the city. People with businesses, people with multiple businesses, people who are millionaires. In every other way you would think they were normal, successful, intelligent, educated, with degrees, successful in their business, with a career, etc. Yet, they're running to these fraudsters, with packets of meat. They're running to these fraudsters for ta'weez, and they're actually paying through their nose. They give them £400, £500. I had a story of, I went to a city up north, And they asked me that, do you know such and such a person? So I said, yeah, I know him very well. So he said, do you know what the word is in our community? So I said, no. He said, the word in our community is that that individual has got 900,000 jinns. Here, he lives in Birmingham. He's got 900,000 jinns. I said, no, surely they don't believe it. I said, well, the fact that he has got 900,000 jinns, that's untruth. I can say that categorically. But I can't believe that people actually believe this. I said, no, it's quite common. It's well known. He's a real big hotshot here. So I said, how? He said, only 2 weeks ago, an Imam and an alim was telling me, he said, only 2 weeks ago, someone came to me and told me they had a problem with some jinn. So they contacted him by phone and they told him what the problem was. So this is a city up north and he's here in Birmingham. So they said to him that this is a problem. He said, don't worry, I'm sending a jinn. He said, don't worry, I'm sending a jinn. No, actually, they said to him, will you come over? So he said, there's no need for me to come over. I'm sending a jinn from here. They said, okay, how do you make our payment? He said, just send the check through the post. And astaghfirullah, you know how much a check was for? To send one jinn from Birmingham, he charged them £1,400. Wallah, £1,400. I don't know why he never made it a round figure of 1,500, but there must be some wishy-washy secrets about 1,400. Charged him £1,400. And he's got 900,000 jinns, and just one of his workers is earning 1,400. Imagine what 800,000. 99,999 must be doing. And I said to the people who were gathered there, I said, it's all untrue. They said, no. He's really famous here. I mean, they believe and trust in him so much that they ring him. He said, only 2 weeks ago, a family told me this is what they did. They had a problem with a jinn in the house, or they thought so. So they contacted him and said, come over, we're desperate. He said, there's no need for me to come over. I'm sending my jinn, you send the check through the post. And they said he's got 900,000 jinns. I said, that's strange. That's really strange. I said, I'll tell you something. So what? He said, he's always talking to me. He's spoken to me on a few occasions. Well, he's not always talking to me. He's spoken to me on a few occasions. And he keeps on saying to me that, would you please advise my son and talk some sense into him? He doesn't listen to me. So I said, this guy with 900,000 jinns pleads with me and comes specially to the masjid to see me, pleads with me to sort out his son who's not listening to him. He can't control one son, teenage son, and he can control 900,000 jinns. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. But as they always say, of course, these people exist. But as a cynical one amongst them will probably turn around and say, listen, I'm only providing a service. There's a demand, I'm providing a service. There's a market, I'm providing the goods. Look, if people didn't want it, they wouldn't buy it. I'm not forcing anything onto anyone. They pay for the privilege. Admittedly, our people are, astaghfirullah, they will not give £2 in sadaqah. They will not give £2 in sadaqah. They will not give a few pounds in order to help the needy Muslims here and there. In the masjid of Allah where they come to worship. You see, not this masjid or any other masjid, I'm just talking about in general. In general. People go to a masjid, okay? People use the facilities of the masjid. They do wudu there. They do istinja there. They eat there sometimes. They use the facilities of the masjid. They sit there in winter with the heat blowing from the heaters. They use the lighting, all the facilities of the masjid for their own ibadah. It doesn't matter who the masjid belongs to. It doesn't belong to any denomination. It doesn't belong to any individual. It doesn't belong to any group. And the people who look after the masjid, if they're doing their job correctly, alhamdulillah, they'll be rewarded. If they are dishonest and they're not doing their job properly, then Allah will seize them. Allah will seize them and Allah will take them to task. But it shouldn't change our perception of a masjid Because Allah says, وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدِ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. Verily the masajid belong to Allah, therefore do not call out to anyone besides Allah or with Allah. The masjid belong to Allah. So whichever masjid you go to, it's a masjid. Now people use the masajid, yet the masajid are struggling. There are many masjids. They can't pay the light bill. They can't pay the water bill. So people are not willing to pay the money towards the masjid of Allah for facilities that they actually use. They want that for free. They're willing to go to some sort of witch doctor and pay £500 for some potion or pill or some piece of paper with noughts and crosses on. That will never work. They just think it'll work. Or they'll pay £500 for some jantar mantar. Like I said, as long as there's a market, there'll always be these people. They're only providing a service. And if there's no demand, then they'll die out. But as long as there's a demand, they will always be around. So, it's a shared responsibility. The onus is on them. They are guilty and responsible for their fraud and their forgery, and they're being imposters, and they're abusing the religion of Allah. They're abusing the dua and the Qur'an and Sunnah. But then the people are also jahil and foolish for going to them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to understand. Sallallahu wa sallam ala abdihi wa rasulih nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
This lecture was given by Shaykh Abu Yusuf Riyadh al-Haq and has been presented to you by Al-Kawthar Productions. For further information, additional lectures and books, contact us on 0121 773 5191 or alternatively by post at Al-Kawthar Productions, P.O. Box 6008, Birmingham, B10 0UW, United Kingdom, or visit our website at www.alkawtharacademy.org. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.